Chittenden Solid Waste District's Organic Diversion Facility is home to Green Mountain Compost. Our site, located in Williston, Vermont, was opened in 2011. The new location was opened after more than 20 years of operations as Intervale Compost Products in Burlington, Vermont. As part of the Chittenden Solid Waste District, or CSWD for short, the compost program has a dual mission of maximizing diversion of food waste from the landfill stream while also creating high-quality soil amendments to enrich local lawns and gardens. CSWD collects residential and commercial food waste as well as leaf and yard waste from a network of 7 drop-off centers located all around Chittenden County. Landscapers and residents may also bring these materials directly to the facility. In 2019, CSWD was awarded a $500,000 infrastructure grant from the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources. The matching grant funds were used to expand and improve the compost facility. Work completed in 2020 and 2021 included installation of nearly 7 acres of stone pads and access roads, extension of 3-phase power to the relocated screening area, and equipment purchases of a windrow turner, haul truck, and stacking conveyor. The project is nearing completion in 2021 and will enable much greater efficiency in the operation. The transition to utilizing a windrow turner is a critical component of the expansion efforts. This machine is now being used for multiple operations throughout the compost process, and it replaces 4 pieces of heavy equipment previously retained to get the same amount of work accomplished. The compost produced by CSWD's Organics Diversion Facility is comprised largely of 4 main ingredients, referred to as feedstocks. The food waste that comes into the facility is the driver of the process, as it is the feedstock that is most likely to cause problems if left unblended. Food waste alone, however, does not make a good recipe, and instead requires a high-carbon bulking agent in order to make a good blend. Here at the ODF, the majority of the carbon comes in the form of leaf and yard waste, or from wood chips. Roughly 5,000 tons of leaves and yard waste are dropped off at the facility each year, with large influxes in the fall and again in the spring following snowmelt. Wood chips are another critical feedstock for the compost blends at the facility. In addition to providing the recipe with an additional source of carbon, they are counted on to give the compost piles sufficient porosity to ensure that proper oxygenation can be established throughout the active compost process. The primary source of wood chips used at the facility is the brush and wood waste that is brought in by customers to the district's drop-off centers and ground up on a regular basis. During periods when this stream of wood is insufficient to meet the needs of the compost recipe, additional wood chips are purchased from local sawmills. Animal manure and bedding makes up the last key ingredient for the compost at ODF. Since the dawn of agriculture, manures have been treasured for their ideal characteristics as a soil amendment. Chock full of nutrients and microbes critical for robust plant growth, inputs such as horse manure and bedding also start with an ideal ratio of carbon to nitrogen for composting. Including manure and bedding serves as a buffer to other inputs that may vary over time. The food waste that drives the composting process at ODF comes in all forms and from all sources. From school cafeterias to grocery store discards to residential plate scrapings to food manufacturing, pretty much any food sources that were once part of a living animal or plant can be composted at our facility. When combined all together and irrigated with enough rainwater to bring the moisture content up to the target range, the bacteria that make up the driving force of early-stage composting get right to work, converting putrescible organic matter into stable soil components while creating heat and carbon dioxide in the process.
When making a new batch of compost, each bay and phase 1 needs to be cleaned out.
several weeks of forced aeration in the active composting phase, the compost begins to acquire characteristics of a finished product. Initial pile temperatures that reach 140 degrees Fahrenheit or greater begin to cool down as the energy tied up in the food waste is converted into stable soil components. The next step in the compost journey is one of windrow formation and curing piles. The compost is hauled to the windrow pad, where it is placed into long rows, sized perfectly for the windrow turner to straddle and complete turns. Prior to the arrival of the windrow turner, the organics diversion facility utilized an excavator to turn the windrowed compost. This allowed staff to stack materials into very high piles, but was an incredibly slow and inefficient process. The previous method took roughly 2 weeks of staff time in the excavator to turn the entirety of the curing compost piles. Since the arrival of the windrow turner, this process has been shortened to a mere 4 hours. This improved efficiency has enabled staff to focus on other critical pieces of the process. As the piles continue to age, cool, and mature, there is a shift from bacterial decomposition to fungal decomposition as the remaining wood chips and other lignaceous components further their transition to soil. During the next 2 to 4 months, these windrows will be turned multiple times, further homogenizing the blend, introducing oxygen to the still breathing piles, and inverting the piles in the process. Following this final stage in the compost curing process, the compost is sampled for greenhouse and laboratory trials, and eventually hauled to the compost screener for size reduction and removal of any rocks, sticks, or other non-compostable items that may still be in the mix. As the largest food waste compost facility in the state, located within minutes of the greatest population density and largest institutions, we receive a lot of food waste. And we've seen the amount of food waste being diverted from the landfill increase substantially in recent years. Working with hauling partners within our district, we've seen annual tons of food waste sent to our facility more than double since we relocated in 2011. The first calendar year that we opened, we received just over 2,500 tons of food waste. This past year, that number was nearly 5,900 tons. Vermont's universal recycling law mandating the diversion of food waste from the landfill was originally passed in 2012. It came into full maturity in July of 2020, reaching down to the individual household level. While we are delighted to see more and more Vermonters taking food waste out of the landfill stream, the increase has not been completely smooth sailing. More food waste has also meant more contamination. Every commercial compost operation deals with some degree of contamination in their product. At CSWD's organic diversion facility, a fair amount of effort has been made to remove unwanted items from the compost stream every year. As the universal recycling law reached full maturity this past summer, and the organics diversion mandate reached the residential level, we've seen a large increase in the volume of plastics and other contaminants coming into our facility, along with the food waste. Smaller facilities are often able to pre-screen the food waste coming into their facilities and remove any non-compostable items at that point. Similarly, much larger operations often have dedicated equipment and staffing that take on the task of pre-screening. The scale of our operation has made pre-screening of individual loads a very difficult task, and we rely largely on contaminant removal throughout the process instead. Despite dedicating hundreds of hours of staff time and significant costs towards additional screening technologies, managing plastics remains our biggest challenge. The recent addition of a windrow turner to the operation has the benefit of exposing plastics contained within the piles with each pass it makes, making them visible and more accessible for collection throughout the process. On the negative side, it also has the tendency to fragment larger film plastics into smaller pieces, which can be more difficult to remove. We're currently working on a multi-pronged approach at reducing the overall plastics contamination burden that should enable us to maintain maximum product quality while streamlining production. Upcoming efforts include a ban on compostable products beginning January 1st, 2022. Increased education and outreach through CSWD staff and statewide partners, an improved and enforceable contamination policy, investigations into mid-process screening options, and a diversion of the most contaminated loads to depackaging facilities. As always, we remain committed to producing the high-quality finished products that customers of Green Mountain Compost have come to expect. We look forward to the day in the near future when our high-quality product standards can once again be met due to a reduction of incoming plastic contamination rather than having to pull it out along the way. Following months of hard work by the bacteria, fungi, and other microbiology responsible for transforming our food waste into a powerful soil amendment, the next step in the process is screening. The main strategy here is to grade the components of the cured compost into different sizes. The majority of the compost is screened to a very fine consistency, while remaining rocks, wood fractions, and any non-compostable items still in the mix are removed. A series of decks with rubber stars spinning at high speeds makes this possible. In addition, there are vacuum fans that operate at a high frequency that pull out any film plastic that might be in the mix. The resulting compost fines are now available for sale as is, or are blended with other inputs to make one of the value-added soil products sold by ODF. Compost is typically not recommended as a growing medium by itself. When blended with materials like sand, silt, and peat moss, however, compost provides the magic ingredient to bring any soil blend to life. Prior to the arrival of the Windrow turner, CSWD's Organics Diversion Facility utilized multiple trommel screens to process blends like topsoil and garden mix. Now, staff is able to make an excellent blend of the screened compost and soil inputs utilizing just the Windrow turner. This process is much quicker and arguably produces a much better blend finished product. The two main manufactured soil blends made at the facility are garden mix and topsoil. Garden mix is designed for raised beds, while topsoil is a more general soil used in landscaping and lawns. Compost is layered with the other soil amendments and then turned in place as the Windrow turner makes repeated passes over the length of the pile. Compost, garden mix, and topsoil are sold in bulk quantities to landscapers, garden centers, and contractors. From small dump trucks to tractor trailers, seasonal high demand keeps the loaders moving all day loading vehicles. CSWD's Organics Diversion Facility produces between 10,000 and 13,000 cubic yards of compost each year. Roughly half of this compost is sold as straight compost, while the remainder is blended and sold as garden mix or topsoil. For more than 30 years, Chittenden County residents have come to rely on Green Mountain Compost products as a quality soil amendment for their lawns and gardens. In recent years, it is not uncommon for demand to outstrip supply, though staff try their best to stay ahead of the curve and keep our gardeners happy.